As I know many of you probably have realized by now, a new interview featuring IGN's Ryan McCaffrey and Todd Howard has just surfaced, where we get some interesting developer insights into Fallout 5 of all things. There's years away until that project, we'll talk a little bit about it. Skyrim, Starfield, of course, and the Elder Scrolls 6. Now, if you're looking for some big, monumental, massive reveals, unfortunately, they're not in here. I would avoid any of the thumbnails that are talking massive reveals, big new updates. That's not the case. Unfortunately, it's limited to some small details, a lot of stuff we already known. However, that being said, if you are interested into the development cycle of some of these games, Todd Howard's mindset for some of these games, you'll likely find some interesting bits of information here. For any of those juicier details, we're likely going to have to wait until E3 when we do finally get that big monumental demo that Bethesda is known for showcasing months before the release of their game. When it comes to this interview, however, it is in celebration of Skyrim's 10th anniversary, so they did begin the interview talking a lot about Skyrim, how it felt back then, how they feel about it now, and Ryan actually did a very good job of poking Todd's brains as to the mindset that went on during the development and how it feels now in hindsight. In particular, Ryan asks how Todd feels about Skyrim 10 years later after its launch, and Todd mentions how it feels like it's always going to, or it will always be, a part of Bethesda's history due to the widespread success, the popularity, and how accessible that game was for a lot of fantasy fans. It just left a mark not only on the industry, but of course on Bethesda as well. He also goes on to state how it was able to take advantage of the technology. Skyrim was released at the latter half of the Xbox 360 generation. If you remember, it's hard to believe, but Oblivion was released on the same systems as Skyrim was. However, Skyrim was able to take advantage of it because the hardware had been out for a long time. They were able to push what it could do to its limits. Similarly, we're going to find Starfield in a similar position, right? The new generations, the current generations, I guess, of consoles have been out for quite some time now. Bethesda has time to experiment with them, work with them. We know what the hardware is. Although it's their first game being published on this newer hardware, it still gives them time to fully understand it and utilize it as much as they can be. On top of that, they also have, of course, the Creation Engine 2.0, which will further enhance and just push all of Bethesda's standards to a whole new level that we haven't seen before, which is something, once again, Todd is very quick to point out, as we've heard in the past. More interesting to me is when Ryan actually hones in on what Skyrim didn't do well, what Todd thought that they could have done better, and specifically he mentions how they wish they could have had deeper systems in the game. There's a veneer of systems that are there, but there's not much depth to them. He doesn't give any specific examples as to what he means about this, but I think you could look at a couple cases that we saw. For example, in Skyrim in particular, we saw the evolution of the crafting system, right? You could go into Skyrim and you could craft and improve your weapons, but Fallout took that to a whole new level, and I think that's the level of depth that he's referencing during this interview. You could also take a look at, for example, the housing and the settlement system in Fallout 4 and how that might be improved leading into Starfield. This is an interesting point that he brings up because I think any game, when you try to do something new or experimental or innovative, you're going to run into this problem, right? Over time, through sequels, you have opportunities to improve systems that you've previously created. For example, with the Shadow of Mordor series, right? Shadow of Mordor implemented the Nemesis system. They further improved it in Shadow of War, and we know now they have a patent on it to continue to utilize it and grow that system. Anytime you implement something new like that, it's going to go through its baby steps and its hiccups and grow as you work with it. So when it comes to Starfield, it's going to be interesting to what types of systems they have inevitably have a similar comment towards. He also mentions the way NPCs respond to you isn't exactly where they would like it to be. I'm curious to see how they might improve this for Starfield. Does it mean that there'll be a little bit more of an affinity system between multiple different NPCs? We know that in Skyrim, for example, we only really saw the guards remark on things you've been doing on the world, so will just regular people, standout citizens, have something to say if they know that you're maybe a shady person or you've been working with a certain group of people? Hopefully we can see these improvements in Starfield. If not, Elder Scrolls 6, and we're going to talk about some of the benefits of the wait until Elder Scrolls 6 in just a bit. To jump back a bit for the comment that Todd made regarding the depth of certain systems in the game, It's interesting because you could probably say the same thing about the Creation Engine 2.0. This is their first game on that system, which means that they're going to learn how to utilize it for future projects, meaning the Elder Scrolls 6, and it's going to be interesting to see how they explore and exploit and utilize and push that technology to its fullest potential after building some experience on the platform. Bouncing off the weaknesses of past Bethesda games, Ryan also asks what were the strengths. Ryan in particular mentioned how he feels like every Bethesda game is like an album, how they improve, they're different enough where they feel distinct from one another, and that's a fact that Bethesda actually intentionally implements. Todd said when he works on new projects, even if he's going within an existing franchise, for example, the next Elder Scrolls game, he likes to try to wipe the slate clean and say, well, how can we develop this now? What should a fantasy game look like now? Not what we've done before. And I appreciate that mentality as well, and I think it's proven successful for most of their projects. He asks what he likes about certain games. Todd remarks that the quest system in Oblivion was the best writing or the best questing that they had. The feeling of playing Skyrim, it just felt the best in your hands, while the world of Morrowind was his favorite because it did feel alien in nature and cool to explore. I think this is a sentiment that most Bethesda or Elder Scrolls fans can get around. While we might argue tit for tat which one's the best and which one's better, I think that he really nails it in this conversation here. They all have their own strengths. Surely Starfield is going to have his strengths. It's not going to do everything better than previous Bethesda games. Elder Scrolls 6 is going to do some things, but not everything better than Skyrim. That's just how it is, but I think that they're on a good point where they're constantly trying to push their games in new directions, and that's why we always see these games, Bethesda games, appear on top game charts, Game of the Year listings. All of the awards that they win is because they're pushing the envelope, versus other games where they find a formula and they stick to it because they know deviating will annoy too many fans. There's a risk there, especially with these big AAA budget titles. Bethesda's willing to take it. Regarding Elder Scrolls 6 and the time between launches, Todd says, of course we want to release our games sooner. It takes about 4 to 5 years to develop a project, about 2 years in pre-production, about 1 to 2 years for full-on development, and then of course testing and everything else that goes into the development process, creating the music, concept art, the whole process. So there's a lot that goes on there. Of course he wishes that he could do it sooner. However, he thinks that Elder Scrolls in particular is in a healthy place. You look at ESO when the community's doing really well. You look at the numbers of the player base of Skyrim, it's still doing well. They're not in a hurry to release a new game. He went on to further elaborate that the time between these entries allows for fresh sparks to grow. On top of that, new team members, he doesn't say this in the interview, but new team members can come in. They've hired staff. They've scaled up so much since Skyrim that you have entirely new ideas, entirely new talent, and just a lot of potential for the series to be bigger and bigger and bigger based on how much scalability there is for these franchises. Now finally, we're in the latter half of this interview. We get to the more interesting bits regarding the Starfield information we did receive. A lot of time was spent discussing and going back and forth on the release date for Starfield, that 11/11/22. In the midst of current events, it's hard, and we've seen every single game and title, well, not every single one, but so many games have announced dates to be delayed. Everything in the media industry really is being pushed back for different reasons, and this is acceptable, we all understand, but it's no less disheartening for fans when we get our expectations set. Some games have been delayed for a year or more. Bethesda fans should be happy to know that Todd's really confident in that release date. We have heard that before, but otherwise they wouldn't have put it in the trailer. Of course, he does acknowledge the fact, it's worth noting, he does acknowledge that, yeah, anything could happen, things pop up, but right now we are committed to meeting that 11/11/2022 deadline. I'm not holding out my hopes. I understand that there's just so much that can go on between now and then. You don't know what's going to happen, but at the very least, fans can rest easy knowing that whatever delay might come, if it comes, is for the betterment of the game. And realistically, we all kind of know that Bethesda can't do another Fallout 76. That'd be pretty bad. Finally, it is once again mentioned that Starfield is going to be like Skyrim in space. Todd specifically says it's the best elements of Skyrim in space. He does say that all of the hallmarks of Bethesda DNA will be present in this game, and I think that's a good thing. We know what to expect with a Bethesda game, generally speaking, and we're going to get that here. So if you like Fallout, if you like Skyrim, if you like both of them or one or the other, you'll find something within Starfield that's familiar enough you could latch onto, but it's still alien in nature and foreign to us that it's exciting to explore, which is the benefits of creating this whole new IP and brand new universe. Some of the things that he does mention in regards to this statement is being able to interact with everything, right? Picking stuff up and looking at it, observing it. That's something you can't do in most games. Most things are static objects. Bethesda, you can pick them up, observe them, throw them around, do whatever you want. That's part of what Todd really feels makes his games interesting. He also mentions the factions in the game will be something familiar. I'm not sure if in this he means that a Fallout 4 style system where you can't align with every faction, right? At some point you have to make a distinct choice, or if he's referring to a Skyrim-like system where you can join every single faction, there's not really any repercussions for doing so, and that way you have access to the whole game. We don't yet know. Of course, it could be a little bit of a hybrid of those two somehow. What I think he means more so by this statement is the level of depth, the level of lore and detail that these factions have, that it really helps to define what kind of character you're playing. Todd mentions at the very end of this interview, I think it's one of his best statements, that they're all about making worlds you can find yourself in. Who are you in this world? You define your character, you define who you are by what you do. And I think that's what he's implying by the factions having, you know, sort of a hallmark feel for Bethesda games. He also says the skill system will be something that they've done in past titles. Now, of course, it will be innovated and new for Starfield, but it's going to pull on elements that we've seen in the past. For me personally, I'm not going to try to speculate what that might be. I do assume some form of a perk system will be present. I think that's pretty safe to say. But I am hoping for a bit of a return to the, you know, implementing skills and points. As a D&D player, I'm a fan of strength, dexterity, charisma, right? That's that very simple and old style, put your points into these skills and see what goes up. I think that's a rewarding level system because I can visually see stuff going up or down. Skyrim's worked for me. Fallout 4's wasn't my favorite. Bethesda has stated in the past that Starfield will be more of a return to RPG elements. This could possibly be one of those areas that they mean about it. We'll have to wait and see. Again, I don't want to make any assumptions on this matter. There also was mention of Fallout 5. Interestingly, I might develop a whole other video on this topic. I have an idea for one at the very least. They did mention the next Fallout game. Ryan asks whether or not they will take advantage of the other teams that are, now that the Microsoft integration is complete, they could use studios like Obsidian to help out, especially when there's going to be such a long gap between Fallout titles. Of course, you have Fallout 76, which is ongoing, but the next one, it's going to be a while. Fallout fans, you're going to experience what we, Elder Scrolls fans, are currently going through. And Todd kind of shuts down the idea a bit. I don't want to put words in his mouth. He does say, you know, anything can happen, but it really does seem like they want to keep it internal. They want to keep it to themselves. So that idea of a Fallout New Vegas 2, sorry, Fallout fans. So in regards to new details, that's about the bulk of it that we went over here. Again, nothing we didn't know before, nothing we haven't heard in the past. It's mostly things said in a different way. If you're interested into development insights, there's a lot for you here. And if that's, you think that might be interesting, please do go check it out. I'll try to remember to leave it linked in the description below. But thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please do leave a like. And as always, I hope to see you all next time. So long, everybody.